Welcome one more time to KAOS Boxing and Fitness. My name is Tristan Oseguera, and today is Wednesday. Today's Wednesday. Let me tell you, July 14, 2021, and this is a special event or special. Hold on a second. Give me 1 second here, because we have a special guest today. All right. So I'm checking a couple of things here, and we are going to welcome our special guest today. And we want to have an amazing conversation today. Ladies and gentlemen, today with us in KAOS Boxing and Fitness, CEO, founder, celebrity, personality, he's NAUDI Aguilar, the CEO and former owner of Functional Patterns. NAUDI, are you there?
I am here. Can you see me?
No.
Can you hear me?
No, sir. I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
Oh, start video. Okay, I think you see me now.
There you go, man. Bienvenido. Welcome, my friend.
How you doing, man?
Very good. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I really appreciate it. And it's an honor having you here, because I've been following you for many years, since you start all your functional patterns and mechanic movements on social media. I remember the first time I think I see you was in MySpace. I remember I live in Mexico in that time, and I started to follow some videos you was doing with kettlebells and training, and I remember the story. You was doing MMA before, yeah?
No, not really, man. My story, bro, is more that I study mechanics and movement. A long time ago, this is maybe like, I think it was back when I was like 17 or 18, maybe just right after I graduated high school. I had access to download fights and just download video in general. And so it was through like a website called, I think, LimeWire. Then there was another one called Kaza. There was these websites that you could pretty much like pirate professional fights. And so it was after, even since I was a kid, I used to watch like football. Like I'd have football videos, basketball videos. I just liked watching video. I've always been like enthralled by looking at like things moving in space. And so really the martial arts always interested me. I was always like into watching like, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Sylvester Stallone. I was always into that as a kid. So the martial arts, I was always drawn towards it. I remember when I was a kid, my whole family was always big into like Julio Cesar Chavez and whatnot. As a Mexican, you know what I mean? Like that's what it is. And
who doesn't love Julio Cesar?
Yeah, man. I mean, I love his fighting. I love the way the guy fought. And I didn't really begin to study him maybe until I was like 23, 24. It's when I started seeing more video of him. But I've just watched a lot of athletes move. And the one that the sports that have intrigued me the most, for me personally, my first love was watching football. I liked football and basketball the most. But then I moved on into boxing, and then eventually just watching mixed martial arts like kickboxing. So I've always just been big on watching film. I've always liked watching film. And so I don't really have a background in it. I think a lot of times they're confused by me. Like I've been through a lot of MMA camps, and, I work with professional fighters and whatnot. Yeah. People will be like, he's demonstrating some aspects of wrestling, some aspects of striking, footwork. Did this guy, he's never fought before. I got a lot of flack even when I would work with Kyle Dake. He's a wrestler. I'm sure you've probably heard of him. But yeah, I got a lot of flack. He kind of got a lot of flack because people would be like, man, why are you allowing this guy to tell you how to like tamper with your wrestling style and whatnot? And for me, I can see inconsistencies in his patterns of movement. And I was like, okay, if I don't change that, he's going to get injured. And so it's like, there's a lot of confusion that goes into what I do, because on one end of the spectrum, you'll see me, helping, like you'll see one of my practitioners helping somebody with cerebral palsy, with somebody who could barely walk. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you'll see me like showing somebody how to like throw up a leg breaking low kick, or you'll see me swinging a kettlebell or whatever. So I'm just more, I look at myself kind of like as a biomechanical generalist. I try and look for the common denominator of what makes a person move well, and I apply it to all levels. So I don't really have I don't have a typical background. And I think that what I do is so unusual because I came at this from such a different angle. Like most people have like traditional training, they had a coach, things like that. I think I played team sports when I was a kid. I played a Pop Warner football for about 3 years when I was like from 12 to like 14, 15. And then I wrestled 1 year when I think I was in 7th or 8th grade. And then after that, I never really played any other sports. My grades always sucked. I was never great in school, so I could never keep my grades up. So I never really competed in athletics, and I was always real small too. I was always a really, I still am obviously, but I was a real small guy when I was in high school and whatnot. So it kind of prevented me from really being able to I wasn't good in school, and then never mind that I was small, and I was like, I didn't want to get hurt. And so I was like, I don't know if I want to go in there, because I'm like, I could go play football and I might be able to survive, but if I get one of those big dudes that hits me, I'm gonna they're gonna put my lights out. So I'm like, I'm not gonna take that route. Even when my grades were better, I opted not to play football. I knew it wasn't gonna be pretty for me. So ultimately, man, it's I think I have a really, really unusual set of circumstances, which is why I think Functional Patterns as a company is so unusual. That's why I think it's so different than anything anything anybody's really witnessed in the industry so far.
Yeah, exactly. No, and as I said, so in the beginning, I said thank you to you, because I don't understand sometimes people on humanity. Yeah, I believe, and
Neither
sometimes
do I.
it's weird, because as you mentioned, yeah, you maybe you was no allowed, because you understand you cannot play some sports because maybe you like it, but you are observer, yeah, and something to I admire from you, on to be on, not because you're here in this podcast right now or this live chat. I've been following you for a long time, and I appreciated many of the things you put on your channel on information, because in my personal opinion, those details help me to fix myself and fix other, less to call a stupidity I was doing with my own clients. Yeah.
Yep.
Because, and I discovered like, oh my God, yeah, it's true. So that was wrong. Yeah. And of course, I've been following for the time of the year. One of the things, you are so good speaker. You go, because if you are not well prepared, I saw many people, myself sometimes, people do it sometimes in social media and TV, they doubt about the words they are using sometimes. And the way you speak and you explain people about what do you find, what do you experiment, and no experiment, you perform with your clientele, you perform yourself, you're very explicit, and it's like I give the recipe from the pancakes. Yeah. And some people, how much, a cup and a half or 1 cup of flour. Yeah. You say it's 1 cup, it's the milk, it's the eggs.
Well, no, well, look, bro, that's kind of true. The truth of the matter is, though, bro, it's like, I don't think I'm a particularly great speaker. It's something that I struggle with all the time. I've had to work on it greatly. I don't speak to the degree. I don't communicate effectively to the degree that I wish I could communicate. So I still see there's many things I see that I can't put into words. And so if I sound convincing, I guess that's a good thing from a business standpoint, man. But the only thing I really am convinced about is that I'm not so certain of I'm certain of certain things, but I'm not certain of all things. And I just, when I speak, I try and do whatever I can to speak on what I'm pretty certain of. But ultimately, what I've learned over my time is, it's like, even as a trainer, that it's not necessarily about so much of what it means to be a really good trainer comes back to knowing what techniques you need to throw in the garbage and which ones you need to put on the shelf because you're not ready to approach that technique yet. Like, for example, I would avoid lunges. And the reason I avoided lunges for years was because I'm like, I don't know how to do this without like damaging my knee. I'm like, am I allowed to shear my knee? And if I am, how am I going to approach the shearing on my knee if I'm going to do a lunge? I don't know if I should do this. Even with the squat, there's so many techniques that people kind of take for granted. They assume, hey, this is a basic technique. It seems simple enough, but there's always intricacies to every single technique. And so for myself, I always thought, I'm like, there's no blueprint for how we're supposed to move. There's general theories, but there's no blueprint for how we're supposed to move. So I think the only thing that I've ever really been certain of is the fact that there's general principles, but overall, it's actually pretty uncertain, man. I maybe if I come off as being Mr. Confident, that might be the case. I guess there's some things I'm confident about. But overall, man, I don't carry that much confidence with what I do because I realize that everything I know is liable to change or be evolved, be refined. It's like if you teach a fighter to throw a punch, it's like you're going to teach them how to throw that punch, but then it's like within time I might discover another 500 to 1,000 modules that get me like several millimeters more of leverage on that punch, and I may have to like add different things to it. So anytime I work with somebody, I always operate from the parameters of like, hey man, this is like what I know now. This is what I know up to now, but things are going to change. And I think anybody who's ever worked with me in person or has like been around me, they understand that, yeah, I maybe I sound certain of myself, but more than anything, what I feel like is that I'm just relaying what I understand up until this point. That's how I always feel about it. And these days I do feel much more confident in myself. These days I definitely do, man. But there was a while there where there wasn't a lot of confidence, but I've had to really analyze a lot about biomechanics to really earn some kind of confidence. So maybe these days it might be a bit different.
And I think that's important, you know, like in life, not just you. And I think for all the people. And right now, I'm listening. I promise I go to read some of the comments here, but I want to enjoy this time because you are here right now. But that's true. Like without confidence, so obviously you cannot do the job. And any person, I think people need to be confident in what you do, and that's just a gift you have. Yeah, you have that self-confidence to perform your profession. Yeah. So let's to cut the cake from the beginning because we want to talk about a couple topics to some haters I hope appear here and people understand.
I don't think they will, bro. The thing is they never like is it Tristan?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Tristan.
So yeah, Tristan, they never pop up when in these circumstances. Typically they'll pop up, and don't get me wrong, they pop up from time to time. There's such a look, let me put it this way. I don't see them as haters. I see them as skeptics. People like, let me put it this way. How often do you see fraudulence being pervasive in our society? Like get rich quick schemes, motivational speakers, like fake healers. You see this all over the place. So on my end, I don't see haters most of the time. What I actually see are just people that are skeptical. They look at a guy like me and they're like, how do I know you're not like somebody else? So where I'm at, right, they used to piss me off. Haters used to piss me off. These days, I kind of just ignore them. I try and give them the thing is, if you give a hater attention, then at that point, you're giving them what they want in that specific moment. And if you give them what they want in that specific moment, they're going to stay on that pattern. But if you don't give them any attention, then at that point, you're going to have to force them to go like actually work in the real world, man. So I've like learned in my life that it's like with haters or with skeptics, I'm like, it's good to entertain them. It's good to see what they're saying. So that way, at that point, you're like, okay, you feel that about me? All right, well, let me do this, and this, so I can take your skepticism and make you at least a little bit more open to what I'm talking about, man. So I don't mind skepticism at the end of the day, man, because I realize that people are still they're skeptical with good reason. And the whole thing is I can't assume that people are just going to listen to me based upon first impression, which is why I've worked so hard to develop the results that I've gotten with functional patterns. So I could earn like a certain level of trust with the general consumer, with people in general. And I think because of that, those results, now the skepticism is beginning to diminish. So I wouldn't foresee that there's too many haters. If you can, try not to pay too much attention to them, bro, because they're going to be there. But at the end of the day, it's like, I like to try and focus on my work. I like to try and focus on what I do. And honestly, bro, these days, I'm actually really happy with how I feel, despite the fact that I got like a privilege on my Instagram taken down because I had yogis who are clearly my competitors in the industry who have a huge mass of people that reported things to Instagram, and now we can't message to our followers. We can't send them personal messages. But you know what's interesting about it, man, is I feel like we've turned a corner as a company, because in the past, if I was to mention something like this, nobody would have cared. But the outpouring of support that I've gotten today is actually really astounding. I'm seeing that people are like, you know what? Screw those yogis. If they want to act the way that they do, then let them act the way that they do, man. But at the end of the day, we acknowledge you for the value that you put forth, for the clear and concise message that you put forth on your video regarding yoga. And you know what? If anything, now we're even bigger fans because of this. Because if you have resistance, if you have haters that are there if you have haters that don't get results, that are hating on you, it's probably because you are getting results and you're actually a threat to them. And so keep this in mind too, Tristan. My career, I believe that I got off on the wrong foot with this industry, because once you're in it long enough, you begin to, and you're in it, and you begin to see the connections that are made within the industry. You begin to see like how all the players connect to one another. It's almost like a conspiracy, right? It's all connected to each other. And I got off on the wrong foot, mainly because I'm not a big partier. I'm not big onto drinking. I don't smoke weed. I don't do drugs. I don't participate in the party scene as many people do. I never went to the fitness expos. I never networked with people in the field. I kind of just came out of left field, where I went completely independent. I started running my own seminars. And when I ran my own seminars, I never had a single problem with people in the fitness industry until people started recognizing or seeing that I was getting a bunch of people in my seminars. Once I started getting people in my seminars, that's when the flack machine came in. I think I got off on the wrong foot, bro, because I just have never been able to really fit in with the way people do things. My outlook on the world is different. So I try and encapsulate sobriety in every single sense of the word, from when I was a kid all the way to when I'm an adult. Sobriety is my number one thing. Can I take reality as it is without having to rely upon a substance to overcome the anxiety, to cope? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in general, my entry into the industry wasn't necessarily the best. I left a good first impression. I just didn't leave a good first impression from a networking standpoint, man. So that whole thing with Gators,
I don't believe it's a bad step. I think it's you do your own step and what you believe, because I don't believe in nothing is wrong in life. We don't do anything wrong, yeah, because we have only two ways to do it. Yeah, it's like you said, you decide to don't consume alcohol, drugs, etc. That's one way. You can choose the other way, and I don't believe I will have this conversation now with you because maybe you was in maybe Woodstock, something like that, yeah, or playing in a rock band. But I think you do the right way, because that's what we are doing today. You are providing us that information. I see people talking really well about you here on the post. Let's just start fast, because these people in Mexico is watching us, because I have followers in Mexico. Amigos en México, NAUDI Aguilar es el creador y fundador de su propia marca o su propia compañía que se llama Functional Partners. Recuérdame cómo se dice Functional Partners en español, que ya se me olvidó.
Patrones funcionales.
Así que pueden seguirlo en su página web, que es functionalpartners.com. Correcto.
Sí, functionalpatterns.com, sí.
Por favor, sigan. Es muy interesante el trabajo que NAUDI está realizando. Estamos teniendo una conversación acerca de su sistema de movimientos mecánicos que él tiene un libro también. Escribiste un libro también.
Sí, el poder de la postura.
Yo lo que les recomiendo a todos ustedes en México, porque en México tenemos muchos problemas de esto, somos amigos de seguir qué pasa con el vecino. Estamos hablando de la cuestión del fitness. Muchos entrenadores en México estamos copiando qué es lo que hace el entrenador en Estados Unidos, pero no tenemos un sistema realmente convencional o realmente empático con nuestros clientes. Les recomiendo que chequen su página web. Si tienen la oportunidad de platicar con él, conecten con él. Así que vamos a seguir con esto aquí. Perdón que hable en inglés, pero hay más gente que nos está siguiendo vivo aquí en Estados Unidos. Así que NAUDI. So let's go on one part and fast. When born Functional Partners? When start?
I think I'm not good with dates, but I believe it was I probably conceptualized the idea, the actual name. I think sometime in 2009. I think it was in 2009 when I conceptualized the name, and I said, you know what? I couldn't believe it, because when I thought of the name Functional Patterns, I was like, Functional Patterns. There's no way somebody didn't take that name already. I'm like, somebody had to have taken the name. And, you know, I looked at the website URL and nobody had even thought of it, but I was like, yeah, I guess Functional Patterns will be it. And it encapsulated so much of what I was trying to do, which is really just find good habits, good behaviors, really because there was a guy, his name's Andrew Huberman. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast, I believe today or yesterday. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how essentially, if people want to get more testosterone or actually feel better in general, that it all starts with good behaviors, right? That everything starts with good behaviors. And after that, you can have like nutritional supplements. And then after that, you could have like pharmaceuticals and things like that can help you regulate your hormones. And what I knew, I was reading Robert Sapolsky way back in the day, back in like 2007, 2008. I got into this work from a guy named Robert Sapolsky, and Sapolsky would talk about that there was a ranking order, right? There was a totem pole essentially of the ways that the body processes and regulates hormones and whatnot, and that it pretty much all starts at the brain. And so when I thought of that, I immediately assumed, I was like, well, if it's brain, it's electrical. it's electrochemical. And so I was like, okay, if it's electrical, before it becomes chemical, then I should probably think about what the right behaviors are that a person should be eliciting so they could find better hormonal regulation. And so back in about 2008, 2009, I was thinking, well, what it seems like is I want functionality, and it's just really what it comes down to is just repeating patterns over and over and over again. And so I was like, okay, well, what I want, what term would essentially summarize, what words could summarize what I'm trying to do? And I said, well, functional patterns. I was like, well, that's what makes sense to me is I want to find the right behaviors and then repeat them over and over again until they become a pattern, and then see how I feel after that. And thus far, it's 12, 13 years later, man, and I'm feeling pretty good. I think life's my body's very happy, fortunately, man. So I feel like I'm in a much better place now than what I was then. But it turns out that vision that I had has turned out to be great. I think I'm finding out what good behaviors actually are for humans, and I think that's part of the reason why people tend to feel a lot better employing my method. But yeah, it was back around 2008, 2009 when I conceptualized functional patterns.
Yeah, and I remember because, as I said, I follow you on Facebook, and because you start first with the brand, and after you create the logo. I remember a couple of times you was posting there about asking people, like, what do you think about the logo? Yeah, and because you start to do this, I remember you have this intro of the logo, like a rock thing, and start to move and have all this burning around the logo. It was turning and it started, but now it's much better. Now you have a good production now.
Yeah, it definitely got a lot better, man. We've definitely improved in terms of the business aspects of it, for sure.
So, okay, it's functional partners. And what is then for you? What is functional partners for the people? When people want to know, okay, what is functional partners? What are you doing functional partners?
Well, that's a tough question, bro, because I kind of go all across the board. For me, I'm always trying to think about what the most fundamental aspects are for good health. And like I was mentioning before, it comes down to adopting behaviors that are going to be conducive towards regeneration. And so much of what I try and put my focus on is understanding what things are going to actually give you a benefit in life. And so most of what I've realized, what's given me the most benefit with my clients, with myself, people often talk about like exercise and diet being the fundamental aspect of good health, supplementation even, but very few people started thinking about it from the aspect of mechanical efficiency. That when you find mechanical efficiency, essentially it optimizes all your other systems. And so things like what I realized that for myself is that the more I find mechanical efficiency with my body, the more I find just optimal movement kinetics, that every other system in my body gets better. My ability to take in photons from the sun becomes better. My ability to digest food becomes better. My sleep becomes better. And so the premise of FP, really, if I could summarize it, I guess it would just be this, is that what I'm trying to do is find economy, I guess motion economy with the body. So essentially, if I can find economy of motion with the body, make the body work economically, not be wasteful in literally every single thing that I do, then essentially the everything that people want from fitness, whether they want to build muscle, whether they want to reduce body fat, whether they want to run faster, jump higher, punch harder, kick harder, have better footwork, whatever, whether they want to climb better, whether they want to swim better, that if you can find a mechanical efficiency with your human body, that pretty much everything else becomes enhanced. And so my objective ultimately comes back to, how do I make the body more economical? How do I make it work better? How do I make your fingers work better with your toes if I can? How do I make your ankles work better with your wrists? How do I make your elbows work better with your knees? I've always thought about working the body in that regard. Like, how do I make things more efficient? What got me thinking about that was when I was I learned this. This is a lesson I learned, I think, when I was about 18 years old. I told this to my students a long time ago. Like, I have a really unusual background. I feel like I was a farmer. My parents were farmers. They had their own orchards. They worked for many other people. They were migrant workers that came from Mexico to come and work in the U.S. And so they were really economically efficient. They were small people, but man, they could outwork big people very easily. And in order to do that, they had to learn to be very efficient. And so my grandpa, he was even smaller than I was. And back when I was about 18, I was helping my parents build their basement. And I remember one distinct time where movement economics, it kind of like, it sparked this thing in my head. And I was like, okay, palancas. I got this from my grandpa. I was mixing. My dad had a tractor, and there's like a big old like scoop where the tractor was, and so we put a bunch of concrete in there, some gravel, a little bit of sand, so we can make our own mix of cement. So then we could like put it into these footings for the house. And I remember that I was facing like the way that I was like trying to mix the cement. I was facing the scoop like this, like the scoop was in front of me, and I was trying to dig at the cement like this. And I remember just getting tired really, really quickly. And then my grandpa was doing it. He was helping me with it. He had a cigarette in his hand, a non-filtered cigarette. He'd just be smoking it while he'd be watching me. Then he'd grab the shovel and then he'd just start mixing it up. And I didn't notice what he was doing. And so he kept watching me struggle. Like he just kept watching me struggle time after time again. And I was like, okay. He's like, look, come here. And so I'm like, all right. I'm like, what do you want? He's like, look, it's like the way that you're doing this, you're doing things inefficiently, man. Let me show you something. I'm like, okay. And so he's like, he grabs my hips, he puts them on the side of the scoop. So instead of me facing the scoop like this and then trying to scoop in like this to mix the cement, my grandpa puts me on the edge of the scoop and he puts my hips on and he puts my hips flush on them. And then from there, I started using I used that obstructive point on the scoop to kind of like lock my hips in. And then I started getting the shovel and then pulling off of that lever that I had in my hip. And my grandpa's like, look, man, you're a small guy. If you're going to outperform people in this world, it's like nobody's going to give you any advantages, bud. What you have to focus on is trying to do whatever you can to find a more efficient path to compete, because that's just the way that the world works. So in essence, in this situation, you got to think about things in terms of mechanical levers. And in Spanish, you said, quiero que te halles una palanca. And I was like, oh, and I started scooping. Bro, my productivity went through the roof. My shoulders weren't stiff. My neck wasn't stiff. My lower back wasn't stiff. And ever since that day, maybe that's the day when I conceptualized functional patterns, because it was after that point that I was like, oh, movement economics, the economy of motion is what's making me get through this work a lot easier. And when you think of the implications of that, when people think about training in this industry, you'll hear about like the public figure saying, you'll have David Goggins out there running for 100 miles or whatever, 200 miles. Joe Rogan will talk about like exerting himself to the max at the expense of his joints. You'll have so many of these people that talk about like pushing themselves to the limit and they understand the implications of movement economics. But when it comes to their training, they never think about it that way. Literally everything I do with every single exercise comes back to trying to find a path of efficiency. And I try and get to the deepest aspects of what gives me the most efficiency with my body. So when I think about summarizing what FP is about, is just about trying to find mechanical leverage, trying to find the right slings, the right hydraulic compressions to get me to move more effectively in space. That to me is what summarizes what functional patterns is about. And my thesis essentially is going to be that I believe that most of the illness that exists in the world relates ultimately back to the fact that people are not economical with their biomechanics. That when people become more economical with their biomechanics, that most of the problems that they thought that they used to have are going to end up disappearing in the future, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, depression, whether it's pain, whether it's other illnesses. I don't want to make too many crazy claims out there about what I believe biomechanics is going to do for people when they enhance them. But I tend to find that the more we begin to, we tend to find the source of what's impeding a person from moving better, the better their life becomes on multiple dimensions all across the board, which is why you see people that get benefit with cerebral palsy, with Parkinson's disease, in athletics. You see it with people who have herniated discs, all that stuff. So the key point is just finding movement efficiency, man. Sorry if I'm all over the place.
No. As I told you when we email each other, please feel free to talk, because sometimes whatever you post sometimes in social media is very short. And as I said, I believe we need to have opportunity to hear you more, because you have the fundamentals. You are a person you are very well prepared. You read a lot. Sometimes you post things, and based to information you read. I remember you have this controversy with a guy talking about the back squat. Yeah. And I listened that time. I can tell you, I am one of those persons. I was doing back squats for many. I'm 50 years old now. I'm 50. And I was having a lot of the problems with my lower back, a lot of the problems with my posture. I was telling my wife, I think it's your car hurting me. I was putting many things, but and because for me, workout, lifting weights was what a society teach me. If you exercise, lift weights, is the best thing you do for life. But
Yes.
the true, it's not. Yeah. When you mentioned you have this controversy, I listened to you and I stopped to put weight on my back. And believe me, right now, I feel much better. And I want to say thank you for that. Maybe I need to listen more from you, and people need to listen more. And not because we have the war with that. You have this conversation with this, I don't want to mention the name, but this power lifter
Thank you.
or fitness
Yes.
trainer. And I remember you see each other, you put your points, and you demonstrate it. How, and it's easy. Yeah, it's like this can I have here. If I squeeze this can, it's going to crash in one moment. Yeah, if we put the pressure. You was explaining just the scientific fact, how you bring to those points inside and you break the mechanics of the body. Yeah.
Well, this is the thing that I want you to think about, bro. The spine has a capacity to rebound against something. So the can doesn't have, based upon the mechanics of a can, if you crush it, it doesn't reset to come back. If you crush the spine, it can come back. It does come back because it operates what you would classify as almost like a longitudinal spring. The question that I ask is, how many times can you do that until the spine crushes down and then it doesn't rebound back up? And what are you doing to ensure that it is going to rebound back up? And even to take it a step further, is the advent of a back squat naturally going to work with, is it naturally something that the body can be resilient against? Like, is a body built to be able to go against lots of weights going into your upper trap region, pushing downward? And so ultimately what it comes down to is that not everybody's going to react to a back squat in the same way. And it's not like it's going to smash your spine or like completely. It's not like it's going to, okay, you do a back squat and your spine's going to get smashed. It's the repetitive trauma, the repetitive motions that it does that over time will cause that compression. And to me, that's of what's most concerned. Now, keep this in mind. Can a deadlift make you squat stronger? Yes. Can a back squat make you stronger? Yes. The question that I always ask is, at what expense? What are you trading off? From my personal estimation, like working with Kyle Dake, so many of his coaches were saying, you're going to stop lifting weights, you're going to get weak. Well, if you see what he's doing now to people and the way that he's throwing people, he's Dake bombing people way more than what he's Dake bombed them before. He's throwing people around like if they're rag dolls. We didn't know a traditional weightlifting for it. And in fact, most of it doesn't really account for us lifting very, very heavy weight most of the time. It all comes down to being able to find good mechanical leverage. And so when I've looked at the things that popular trainers do, when they talk about, hey man, this is why you should, a back squat's good because, it trains your quads, it trains part of your glutes, you get a little bit of hamstring development with it. It's great. I'm like, yeah, you know what? You might get some development out of the glutes, hamstrings, and quads with it. At what expense? To smash your spine more? And never mind that. If you think about most of the motions that we do with our body, whether it's boxing, whether it's running, swinging a tennis racket, it involves this notion of contralateral reciprocation. Like the body moves less like this in a bilateral fashion, and it moves much more like this. So for me, it's been it's been a fairly easy thing to understand that if I'm going to train my body to become stronger, that I need to train my body in relation to what relates to my biology. So when you look at something like a back squat, it's like, yes, we can squat. Humans can squat, but per the majority, when you throw a punch or a kick, your feet are going to be like this, right? If you run, you're going to be like this. Even if you go side to side, your feet are going to do this, right? You're not typically going to just be doing motions like this with your feet 50-50 on the ground while you're going to lift something. It just doesn't seem to happen that often in athletics. And so I've just found that for the longest time that people, when they look at what's happening in the environment, the mathematical calculations that they're making when they do a technique is not actually accurate towards what's happening. And so for me, it's always been from day one, at least from day one, from like 2007, like, is the technique that I'm doing actually going to directly correspond to an improvement of performance in a reality when I do it? That's always been the utmost concern that I've had when it comes to working with myself, with clients, with anybody is, okay, is this technique actually going to transfer to change the pressure distribution at the hip joint, at the knee joint, at the ankle joint, in the lumbar spine, and the thoracic spine? Is this going to transfer over? And I just don't think that when most people train, they just assume, hey, I'm exercising, so I'm doing good for myself. They never actually begin to question, well, how good can I do this? How far can I take this? And really, when you look at the fitness industry in general, the bar's been set pretty low. Like the idea when I tell people, like people be like, well, what do you think about this system over here? And I always ask them, where are the results? I want to see what this training system does. I want to see its results. What does it do for people with scoliosis? What does it do with people for people with a strong kyphosis, or with somebody who has a clear shows signs of a fused SI joint? Can you show me results with that? No, then I'm not into. Then I just tell them I'm not interested. They're not trying to do the same things. For me personally, I'm always thinking about what are the things that matter most to people that they really should care about. And most of the time, people don't care about results. They just figure, hey, look, this training system seems kind of new. Let me do this next trendy thing. For me, it's never been about being trendy. It's been more about trying to find utility, to be useful. I've never measured myself with other people in the industry. I've always measured myself with myself, because I've always been somewhat incomplacent, and I've always wanted to get a lot better with what I do, no matter what I'm doing. When I made music, the reason I quit music and I became a trainer instead was because I was like, you know what? I can't be a great trainer and be a great musician at the same time. If I'm going to be a great musician and I'm going to be really good as a producer, then I'm going to quit being a trainer. But if I'm going to become a trainer, then I kind of have to quit music, and I'll do music from time to time if I want to do it. But ultimately on my end, I've always thought in my mind that if I'm going to do something, I want it to be spectacular. I want to really be like, hey man, I'm doing something special. And so in our industry, the standard is just very low. People don't really, their idea of results is like, hey, look, I had a high amount of body fat and now I don't have as much body fat. That's a result. Okay, cool. Somebody's like, hey, look, I had a really stiff lower back and now I don't have a stiff lower back temporarily.
Yeah.
For me, what I ask is, I'm like, okay, so if you look at the results that we get, you'll have a concoction of different problems that happen with people. One, that they'll have loads of pain. 2, that they'll have excess body fat. 3, that they have less muscle. And 4, that they'll usually have some level of uncontrolled, some problems with anxiety. You'll tend to find this to be the case with most people. What functional patterns does is it addresses all those things at the same time. It's not like you just drop body fat. You just address your pain. You kind of address your mechanics, or you just address the mental problems. FP encompasses all those things at the same time, again, because it goes back to that place of efficiency. And I personally, I just feel like, an alien a lot of times, bro, because I have such crazy ambitions when it comes to the body. Not crazy. I have such logical ambitions, and people in our field, they just, I guess they're just complacent, man. I think this is a big part of the reason why I haven't made a lot of friends, bro, is I'm pretty complacent, and I really, really want to push myself and become great. I want to make sure that I do my training a service, and that I'm not wasting my own time, and that I'm wasting people's time when I work with them.
Yeah, no, and you know what? So, and believe me, I feel just one in a kind people that can come and feel like like we are aliens, and sometimes like one person here is calling me full old boxer something something here is calling me things because the topic is not about boxing, my friend. If you read this KAOS boxing and fitness, so and for me it's important the fitness anyway. So people like you, people, I want to say like me in this case, for example, people come to the gym and then I don't have a ring in my gym because people need to practice movement. Some things to, as I said, because I'm following you, I try to put people do exercises. I don't have the same cable band, but I understand things about mechanics and mobility. And it's like why you need a ring. The ring is going to give you more footwork. It's no, well, okay, I understand is the familiarization of the space, but what I want you to learn is about the striking, about the head movement, about the talking, about the et cetera, et cetera. When you start functional patterns, you start with one studio, but you start to show the results to people, and the things people, as I said, they are receptive. If you see many things like, well, yes, pitch, but all these things, everything is talking about beauty and how you looks very sensual. And mostly all the time, 95%, they use models to promote any fitness products, any fitness program. Everything is about models and all these fit moms or whatever. But they never talk about the one topic that is important. And you mentioned right now, and always I talk with my clientele and I talk with my friends, why fitness or workout or go to the gym need to be luxury? Why you need to pay a quantity of money to become healthy. As I say, I'm 50 years old and I'm happy I can keep moving. I can keep playing with my daughter and I can keep lifting boxes. I can reach up to the refrigerator so some people sometimes go into the gyms, and I have clients to come with me because they come like they hurt their lower back, they hurt the knees because they do all this kind of exercise sometimes. And most of the times is people they never come with the background information and reading. They put the same movement to everyone, like from 18 years old to the 60 years old person in the same room. They do exactly the same exercise. And one of the things I learned from you one time, and as I said, I'm sorry guys if I'm repetitive with that, but I follow NAUDI, and I follow some of the things he posts sometimes on social media come in my life, and I take them. Honestly, I respect what he said because I take them, I test it, and I prove it. I say, oh my God, this is true. And you say one time, no, all the exercises are made it for every person. And I remember very well that, and I put now on my book of keep working, no all the exercises, no, because I do chest press, everybody can do chest press, yeah, because you said the body, some, etc., etc. So you open one studio, Naudi, and after you start to have, let's call followers or fans or people to understand your system, and I start to see you expand functional pattern, and not just in United States. You it's more functional patterns.
We went international before we even went national. It was like FP blew up more in Europe and Brazil before it actually blew up even in the US. Like now it's like the US has got like probably the strongest following, but yeah, honestly, bro, I have some regrets in the way that I've actually taken my career, because it's like when you have to, I've kind of put myself into a CEO position without really intending to put myself into a CEO position. Like the reason I went down the path that I did is because I saw what my predecessors did. I figured like, hey, look, I'm a specialist in this industry. So, okay, I developed a certain level of skill. Then I realized, okay, what I'm doing is unique, and not just unique, it's really good comparatively to what I see on the market. And so I was like, okay, well, what's the next course of action? Well, you do a seminar. So I did a seminar, and then I did another seminar. And then after that, I said, you know what, let me see if I have people that are asking me saying, hey, how do I get certified in your method? And I'm like, well, let me see. Okay, I'm gonna do a whole for this thing's called master courses, and I would have people come with me for 7 weeks, bro, and just completely destroy myself trying to get people to get better. They were brutal courses where people would be with me for 7 to 8 weeks. I did that, and then I was like, you know what? I found that when I would do it, like it was saturating people with too much information immediately, and they were extracting it, and they got value, obviously, but that I could have explained things even better. I was still developing FP in the very during those first master courses, but anyway. I then went into doing human foundations courses to get people oriented. Then from there, I started realizing that there was so much demand that I needed people to start helping me be able to deal with the demand. Next thing you know, I have to start learning how to manage people. I have to start learning how to select the right mentality for what I want to represent my brand. I start finding out, okay, this is the kind of person that's going to succeed in my system, that's going to succeed under my tutelage, and this is the type of person that's not. It's been a crazy thing to see where this has grown and where it's at. Now I'm like, we have our own pulley machines. I have my own patented inventions that I'm working on right now. And it's a complete pain in the ass to get all these things going. I'm still innovating techniques. I have a whole slew of different things that are going on, man. It's been a very, very wild ride to think that, my first videos on YouTube, I didn't even have my own studio. I was actually training out of another spot called Jump Fitness. I don't even think it's in business anymore, but I remember I started there. And then I started at another trainer's gym. And yeah, man, it's been a really, really crazy journey. I never, when I first became a trainer, I did not think this was going to happen, man. It's beyond. Like I think of I took a trip back out to the mainland. I was driving around. We were in Southern California, and I was just around people that I knew back in like 2011, 2012, and just to see how much, like things change as time passes. How you see some people progress in life, and you see other people that just don't, because what people don't think about, especially when they're young. I guess if people are listening to this message right now, what I think I've done that's been unusual for most people is that I've placed my bets at a young age, and I said, look, I'm going to go down this path, and I'm going to do and see where it goes. Whereas other people are like, I don't know if I fully want to commit down that path, because if I commit down that path, then I might fail down that path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to diversify and go down as many paths as possible to prevent myself from failing. And all the people there's some people that I've met who went down a path of being technicians, who now I see them and I'm like, they haven't aged that bad in 10 years. But then I look at the ones that kind of were, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't want to put myself out there. Time passes, man, and you see it and you're just like, oh my Lord, time. And keep in mind, I feel like I've aged a little bit. My skin is a little bit more wrinkly, but I feel like I'm holding together pretty well. I definitely move better than I've ever moved in my entire life. And I could say that quantifiably. But yeah, man, I'll say that from when I started my career as a trainer to where I'm at right now, I could have never, ever, ever speculated. I never would have imagined how much crap I would have taken on. In many regards, I regret it, but in other regards, I don't regret it, because I'm like, I wouldn't have the understanding about the world in terms of how it is right now. And then on top of that, I don't think I would be able to, I think I have enough value to be able to make a huge impact on trying to make the world a better place. I feel like I've learned enough in my life. I've attained enough wisdom through all these experiences to tell people, hey, this is what human psychology is. This is where the state of human psychology is. This is where the state of human physiology is, right? This is the state of our technological development. This is the state of our medical system. I feel like I've developed enough foresight through all this stuff, man. But yeah, man, it's been quite the grind trying to come from from a place where everybody's skeptical of you to then going to a place where that skepticism is beginning to diminish. The amount that I've had to learn is it's something I never would have imagined, man. But I would never do it again. I would never do. If you told me that I had to go through all this crap again with the same amount of knowledge that I first started with it again, I would never do it. There's no way in hell. If they said, now you got to do it the same way and you have the same amount of knowledge, I'd be like, there's no way I would ever do it again. It's honestly, bro, it's been nothing shy of a horrific experience, like horrifying. The amount of fears that I've had to overcome as a human being are beyond what I could have ever imagined, man. But I'm just glad I'm on the other side of it. Hopefully I didn't give myself cancer in the midst of all of it. And in the next 10, 15 years, hopefully I'm still going to be good.
No, but never is good to look behind, like we say in Mexico, para adelante y nunca para atrás, no? It's like maybe your grandparents say that. But yeah, no, I live very close to downtown Seattle, and I on my way to work all the time. Oh, I think I lose you there. But on my way to work always was one studio, one functional partner studio. I don't know if it was yours or somebody of your.
That was our headquarters. I was in Seattle for about 2 years.
Oh, really? So I don't know. I was thinking was somebody from your trainers opened the studio there, but yep. So it's like I live very, very close. I live here in Magnolia.
Yep, I know where Magnolia is. Yeah.
Take me like 10 minutes to get there. Always I pass. Oh, I need to stop there, but always I work in downtown Seattle. Anyway, so I want to speak with you, and ladies and gentlemen, get ready. So once again, here today at KAOS Boxing and Fitness is NAUDI Aguilar, CEO and founder of Functional Patterns. We've been talking about his career, how start Functional Patterns, why is Functional Patterns important and interesting to people to know. So as I said, the fitness industry is very expanded, and it's a lot of stuff there. Can be boxing, can be interval training, CrossFit, etc., etc. I think one of the things we are forgetting as a humanity is taking care of for functional movements and take care of body. To our body is like a car, like a Mustang 69. Let's to keep oiled, gets to get the water, go to the mechanic, keep all the pieces together, don't let to break. Functional patterns is what to do, and I've been following NAUDI doing this stuff, and believe me, some of the stuff he do, I put in my life and change a lot. Go to the website, check the page, follow him in social media, and you can see the results he do, not just to beautiful models and fitness people. He worked with real people with real needs, from athletes, from professional athletes, like the wrestling guy you have there a couple times, and you can see the results he do with him on the training, but also with people to have physical imbalances and their body working with functional patterns. Anyway, As I said, I promise that today's going to be a little bit spicy, but I like spicy because I'm Mexican. What's the topic there to he take long time ago, Naudi? And my wife, the way I meet my wife, 10, almost 15 years ago, she was doing yoga. Okay. She came to Los Cabos, Cabo San Lucas, and she do 1,000 hours of yoga certification. And I love my wife and she is good. She always invite me and I say, no, thank you. I don't know. For some reason, I don't like yoga. Anyway, I don't know when to start. I hear now
because you're Mexican and you understand leverage, bro, intrinsically, and that's why you didn't like it. It's corny. It's corny, and that Mexicans aren't that corny, bro. So I'm sure there could be potentials for that.
I like to keep moving, and I like to environment anyway. So one of the things I put together, you have one day in social media comment about why yoga cannot help to your body and maybe can make damage. But on the other side, I was listening to my wife, she started to have problems with the lumbar and the spinal and her hips. We start to realize, I start to listen to you about that. And please, people to do yoga, don't take this offensive. It's like, as a fitness trainer, I go to the doctor, and the doctor told me don't do something because it's going to be bad for my body. I need to trust in the doctor. I need to trust in something. And it's no, I'm saying something negative, but let's to put the papers on the table and let's to listen, because that's what happened a couple days ago, yesterday. Now they retake the topic about yoga, and people, this is when I say in the beginning, I don't understand humanity. People doesn't listen. Please listen first, and after you can put whatever information. Sometimes all these yogis, they come yogis because they take 10 classes and this is super cool. Oh, I make friends here. I like my Lululemons and do. Naudi, let's to talk about this topic and what happened in social media and Instagram.
Well, look, Tristan,
if you can, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Of course. I want to feel this. Look, man, what I've learned in my life is that and I think we all understand this to some degree or the other, especially our industry, everybody, how do I put this without it sounding like derogatory? Most of the time when you see people come into the fitness industry, they don't come in putting their best foot forward. They're thinking, if I open up a CrossFit facility, I want to open up a CrossFit facility because there's very few barriers towards entry when it comes to having a CrossFit space. I get a weekend certification, and then at that point I can buy, I can open up a facility, and then from there get to be a specialist in CrossFit, and then I have a whole slew of people that want to come to my CrossFit facility to come train with me, and I make easy money. When you think about yoga, it's exactly the same thing. I know that they have their 1,000-hour yoga teacher trainings and whatnot, but I'd imagine that there's people out there, plenty of people out there, who probably, even if they have 1,000 hours of yoga teacher training, I've never seen really yoga get people. I've never seen it consistently get results with people. And some of the most wrecked bodies I've ever seen in my entire life were people who did the most amount of yoga. The weakest bodies I've ever seen structurally are people who did yoga, especially at the lower back, especially at the hips and the knee joints. The knees, hips, and lower back, really bad on yogis. Pretty much everything. Shoulders, neck, hips, and knees. Those areas, the ankles aren't as bad, but the knees, hips, lower back, shoulders, and neck all end up not looking very good. Anyway, essentially what happens, bro, in our industry is that it's as much as we want to think that people can carry an open mind, they can only carry as open of a mind as what their environment allows. Like, so often we think, you know what, you need to have more of an open mind. The problem is that if you carry an open mind to something that, if you're already making, let's say, $80,000 to $100,000 a year having a yoga studio, or let's say $200,000-$300,000 a year, and you're living a comfortable life, and you've developed a reputation for yourself, and people love who you are because you've taught them yoga, and they feel supposedly great doing it, and you've created a community, it's going to be really difficult to take in the information that I present, because I'm not just attacking the yoga practice. I'm attacking your business model, essentially. And so most of the time, you see people that already come with the prepackaged excuses that don't even account for what I've already made on the video. You're not actually seeing a disagreement about the practice. It's more that you'll see red herring arguments that have nothing to do with what I'm talking about to distract from the point that yoga is actually not beneficial, and that they may be making money doing something that's not necessarily conducive to health for most people's bodies and their mechanics. My thing is I think that I haven't made a lot of friends because I don't give people that slack. I just say, look, it's not because you're closed-minded. I just say that your circumstances don't enable you to be open-minded. Because if you open up to my circumstances and you open up to my frame of reality, that means that you have to shatter your frame of reality and you have to start your business all over again. There's a reason you don't see a lot of chiropractors or physical therapists fully commit to doing functional patterns. And oftentimes, although we have a lot of physical therapists that do FP, most of the time, if you see somebody like a chiropractor, they might make $250 an hour working with 4 patients per hour when they do their chiropractic. Well, if they do something like what FP does, they're going to have to take a pay cut. That's just how it is. And so oftentimes what people don't look at, for me, what I've always been very interested in is not just mechanics. Before I was even into mechanics and finding levers and even music or any of that stuff, I was actually into social theory, understanding how societies are oriented, the mechanisms behind human behavior. That to me has always been the most fascinating thing. So when I look at this whole thing with yoga, nothing that I'm saying is remotely like outlandish. Nothing that I said on that video was like, I don't say that everything I say is factual, because nothing is really a fact. It's only a contextual fact, because in some situations, all you have to do is change the context to a certain situation. And then at that point, that fact becomes a fiction. So nothing that I say is fact, but with relative to the constructs of which we operate right now, what I'm saying in that video, with the most recent yoga video, is that there's a somewhat factual basis to what I'm saying. And it's really hard to refute. So when you see people that get upset at what I'm saying, what I try and do is not take it personally, because it's not personal. And I don't take it as a character flaw on their part, because ultimately I understand that people have bills to pay, people have reputations that they have to maintain, and they don't want to be letdowns to the people in their own community. So it's rarely ever about the information that I present. It's always about the environmental circumstance that's forcing those people to behave the way that they do. So I never hold it against them. So as much as people think I'm in control of myself, like there's 2 different camps that you have in this society. On one side, you have people that believe that they have free will, and on the other side, you have the determinists. I'm a determinist to the wheels fall off. I feel that if there's no sun in the sky, I die, and I can't even have a conversation with you. If gravity ceases to exist, I can't have a conversation with you. I only have a choice, free will, in relation to a set of circumstances that permit me to make a decision. And even beyond that, the decisions that I choose have greatly to do with the circumstances that develop me and my character as I've developed as a human being. And so really what it comes down to is I don't think people recognize how much the environment has to play with the decisions that they make. So when I look at somebody trying to defend yoga, it's never a logical decision that people make. It's never logical. People understand that if you take one pill, and you use the same stimulus over and over again, and you expect to use that same formula to find success in all the things that you do, that you're not going to succeed. We know that. Humans intrinsically know that. But when you're trying to make money and you want to make easy money, it's very easy to sell people a pill. It's very easy to have a prepackaged system that you give to people. It makes easy money. And so this ultimately ends up going into my perspective on economics, because then people are like, "Naudi, why do you talk about economics?" Well, I kind of have to, because I've developed a system that's you can't really argue against. You can't argue with the results. It's kind of hard to argue with the results after a certain point. And people might still want to have skepticism, but anybody who knows anything in this industry understands how difficult it is to get the results that we get at functional patterns. So ultimately, when people disagree with me, what I tend to find is that it's never a technical disagreement. It's a economic disagreement. Some thinking, look, Naudi, if I decide to listen to what you have to say, what does this mean between the relationship between me and my wife? What does it mean between my relationship between me and my client, with the people that I know at work? If I listen to what you say, what does this mean for everything that I've ever believed up until this certain point? Because if you're telling me that ultimately efficiency is everything, and you're right, and you have all these results, and I live a very inefficient life, and I've built a reputation for myself living a very inefficient life. All my friendships, all my business contacts, the person that I may have married who maybe didn't want a more economical person, all these things come into play with it, unfortunately. And when I see people who do yoga, it doesn't make sense what they do. Like I could sit here and break down the mechanics of it. I'll tell you, like, let's say, for example, like balance. I'll cover one of the most fundamental problems that come with yoga. When you look at, let's say, for example, a person who's doing yoga, they're stabilizing themselves on a longitudinal axis. And ultimately, when they're stabilizing themselves, they're doing these small micro shifts whenever they find stability in their body. Now, you can do that. But if you look at how biological organisms have developed, they've actually evolved by traversing territory, by actually moving in space. And what that has prompted in our movement with our body is what I would classify as a form of dynamic equilibrium, pretty much just meaning that you find balance through movement. So let's say if I kick this leg back, then that means that the ratio between this leg kicking back in some way, shape, or form has to match the ratio of this leg kicking forward in space to create balance and counterbalance. When you look at something like yoga, that doesn't exist within the practice because they don't train these things. They don't account for these things. They don't account for physics, because if you look at when yoga first started, it wasn't scientific. They didn't know what science was. They didn't have slow motion video. They didn't have slow motion. They didn't have video, period. They didn't have any of these technologies that enable us to come to more relevant understandings about things. And so when I look at like just the fact that yoga, the dynamics of what are involved in yoga, and the fact that they don't account for the physics of moving bodies in space, it makes it impossible to make yoga work. And this is another thing that how many times have you heard, maybe if you look at the comments on my videos, people will just say, you're not doing the right kind of yoga, Naudi. That's why you feel that it's like the reason you feel about yoga is you need to do more research and do the right kind of yoga. Have you ever heard of that excuse?
I believe they're asking to go and do the naked yoga. You remember that? This is, and that's the thing. That's what make me sometimes without offending anyone, like laughing, because you have all these group of yogas and heat yoga and cold yoga and naked yoga with goats, and it's like, so where goes where is going our fitness industry? Because if I remember many years ago, and just one example, to be a good coach, and as I said, I'm from Mexico, and Mexico, we don't have all that luxury to go and train with somebody to when it start to come in certifications, when it start to come to I need to pay for this and this and this to, as you are mentioned, everything is about economy, and you need to pay for legal things, etc., etc. And one example, Nacho Berenstein, I don't think one of the best Mexican boxer coaches was coaching Juan Manuel Marquez, in Mexico City. I don't think if he holds, like in the beginning, he has the knowledge, the experience, and the eyes to see what he was doing right and what he's doing wrong. And that's what is a good coach. Like, hey, no, you need to stand here. Don't keep your hands down. So every sport need to have somebody with expertise, with knowledge, and found the fundamentals of mobility, because everything, any sports, like or like it to the people, is along or belongs to mechanics and mobility and functionality.
Well, let's get into mobility, because that's oftentimes what people talk about with yoga, is that, like, and let me make sure that I elaborate on this. Most of the time when people say, hey, because there's imagine that you're in a box and you don't know that you're inside of a box. And what I realize is that I'm inside of a box, and you've always heard about thinking outside of the box, right? Mm-hmm. My life, Tristan, has been, how do I break out of this box that I'm in? Because I understand that I'm inside of a box. I need to break through, and I'm always thinking, how do I chip out of this freaking box when it comes to what I understand about movement, when I understand about my thinking in general. When it comes to yoga in general, they operate within this box, and no matter what style of yoga that you're doing, they're still in the box. They still use the same techniques. They're still confined. They still are confined to the same physics that exist in all yoga practices, whether you're doing goat yoga, naked yoga, beer yoga, heroin yoga, whatever you want to call it, right? They have all kinds of different yogas. So no matter what it is, the physics are going to be the same. Now, look, as it relates to mobility, if I tell a muscle to contract perfectly, right, and I go into an elbow flexion perfectly, and I link that elbow flexion with the right shoulder flexion, and then I do that with, let's say, a little bit of spine flexion, and then I coincide that with a little bit of cervical flexion or cervical extension, I'm now getting a stretch based upon how I'm adjusting all these ratios. I can feel a stretch on my serratus and I can feel a stretch on my tricep. I don't have to even bend my tricep fully there. So long as the ratios between the moving parts are where they're at, I'm going to feel a stretch on my tricep. Like you can even see it's kind of plumping up a little bit because it's getting a stretch. Mechanical drivers are what are supposed to create a stretch. When most people do poses in yoga, they kind of have to bend and fold over a certain position. They'll have to hit these different positions. They'll have to like lengthen their body really, really far. And what they forget to account for is the fact that in order to create a stretch, let's say on the front side of my finger here, I have to use the muscles on the back side of my body to pull me into hyperextension. But if you look at how people position themselves when they're in their yoga stretches or whatever, let's say if that leg is back, the thing that they don't ask is like, okay, I'm in this position right now. I'm in a warrior pose, right? My leg is split open like this, right? I'm in a warrior pose. What they don't ask when they do their position is, how did I get to this position? What got me into this position? Well, you stand and then you kind of like inch your leg back and then you fall into that position and then you allow gravity to help you facilitate the stretch. That might be okay for a certain few times to do that. But what they fail to recognize is how you get there matters more than anything. When you move in space, if you're running, you know what is the most important part of running in space when you're making contact with the ground, or is it everything before you hit the ground? It's when you're in midair that's the most important part of running. It's not about what happens when you hit the ground. It's about what happens when you're in open space. It's what happens when my legs are traveling through open space like this before I hit the ground that will determine how well I'm going to rebound back up and actually begin to propel myself forward. When you look at a deadlift, when you look at back squats, when you look at any of the exercises that people do, what they account for is what your body is doing when you're connected to the ground. But what they fail to account for is the physics that most of the things, most of the stretching that you get, most of the elastic recoil, the stretching mechanisms that happen when your body is in mid space and when it's in motion doing something. But it's mostly when your body's almost in midair. That's when your body actually gets the most stretching. Yoga doesn't account for that. Yoga puts you into these positions, whether you're doing a back bend, whether you're doing a downward dog. They don't ask themselves what muscles are supposed to drive me into that position. They just kind of end up in those positions, try and get a stretch, and they just assume, hey, it's inconsequential it doesn't matter how I got to that position. What I always think about is, how did I get to that position? What muscles contracted to put me into that position in the first place? And when I focus on doing that, every single technique that I do, Tristan, ends up becoming a stretch. Every single one of them. While I burn out my bicep, I will feel a stretch out of my tricep. While I burn out my pec, I will feel a stretch out of the other pec. While I burn out my glutes, I will feel a stretch in my quadriceps. While I burn out my lateral gluteus maximus or my lateral gluteus minimus, I will feel a stretch in my obliques. I create stretches all the time by focusing on strength training the right way. So essentially, this is how it works. The better you move, the more precise you move, and the more you think about how different parts of the body operate in relation to one another, the better the stretches you're going to get. That's how you're supposed to stretch. I'm all for stretching. I think stretching is great. It's how do we actually get to the place where we're going to stretch that matters more than anything. So this is what it comes back down to, man. It's like you can't argue with the physics of it because muscles need to pull you into a stretch. This leg needs to kick back in open space, hit the ground, and then continue to kick back so you open the hip flexors on the front side of the leg. But if you just bring your leg back and then you say, do a posterior tilt to stretch your hip flexors, that's not the same thing as telling the leg to kick back and use tension through your erector spinae muscles, through your lats, through the front side of your body. There's muscles on the front side of your body that actually pull your leg back based upon how force transmission runs through muscles. There's this right here is going to be present this needs to be present if you're going to stretch your muscles correctly. Yoga can't account for that. Most fitness just doesn't simply account for that. What they typically do is they'll just put you into these positions and just say, hey, get the stretch while you're in the position. And whatever happens after that, you know what? We're not responsible for that kind of stuff. It's hard to get people to fully grasp this. It's hard to get people to fully grasp this. It's just, it's so important from a physics standpoint that people do grasp this, because when they do, they get incredible results and they get lasting benefits. They build strength and they get mobility at the same time. People try and separate strength and mobility. They try and say, hey, look, you focus on your mobility and you focus on your strength. And then you focus on your psychology. Then you focus on your physiology. Then you work on your cardiovascular function. Unless you do all of them at the same time, you're missing the boat. It's all supposed to be inclusive with every single thing that you do. And on my end, if I'm thinking about training the vestibular system, if I'm thinking about training eyesight, if I'm thinking about training anything within my body, I'm always thinking about how do I unite all the concepts together and bring them into one at the same time to ensure that the organism makes the adjustment. So just keep that in mind. When I think about yogis making the arguments that they do, it's never, they always tell me, Naudi, you don't understand, you need to do more research on yoga. And what I always respond to them, I'm like, is it that I need to do more research on yoga, or you need to do more research on what I'm doing? Because I believe I have a better grasp of what you're doing than you have of what I'm doing. Because if you actually understood what I was doing, you would get the same results, right? They would get similar results.
And it's very true. It's so simple. One of the things you are saying, like for example, that mobility, like everything is connected. It's one exercise if the people can see that video, because you have very constant where you connect all these points you are talking. I remember you do that. You was doing that move. I see a couple ladies do that move with you in your studio, where they're laying down complete on their back with the medicine ball, standing from there, elevated, jumping, and after the slam, and you, my friend, you go like a really like a long jump, and you are not pointing about like how far away is about the jumping. Is you are connecting all the moves from the bottom to the top to the landing. And
yes,
it's what you're talking about. A similar. Well, I think it's the effect.
Well, let me put it this way, bro, because this is a thing. The reason I honestly, Tristan, I don't share very much of what I probably, to be completely honest, I share about 0.01% of what I actually do online, because there's a lot that comes with it. Unfortunately, not a lot of people don't give me a lot of pats on the back for what I do. It's more along the lines of like, you know what, Naudi seems like he has an abundance of knowledge. So why do we really need to care about citing the source when it comes to what he does? I'm not saying this to complain, but ultimately I have intellectual property, right? There's a reason that there's a patent and trademark office.
It's your business. It's your job. You're working for that.
The truth of the matter is, it's like what I do in person is stranger than what people can even imagine until they do it in person. Like even when people train with a practitioner, they'll come in to do a human biomechanics specialist course with me, and then they're just like, what the hell? It's just more like, so imagine that I just to kind of illustrate, because what I'm talking about right now are these things called chamber sequences. I didn't even come up with the term. People were just like, well, what is this thing that you're doing, Naudi? I'm like, a chamber. We'll just call it a chamber. Let's just call it a chamber because it's there. I give it an acronym of IMAPS, integrated muscle action potentiation. I give it an acronym. It's a whatever. Essentially what it is, it's a very well executed movement. Like think about it like this, Tristan. Imagine that your body's degenerated, that you have imbalances in your body. And then one day you say, I'm going to do the perfect bicep curl with 5 pounds. But then within your tissues alone, your restrictions represent a form of resistance, right? So let's say you have 50% of your bicep developed. Well, that means that the other 50% of the bicep, let's just say hypothetically, is actually acting in a restrictive state. Well, what if I took that bicep and I used 100% of that bicep with 2 or 3 pounds? What would that bicep do? Because you used it correctly for the first time, it's going to fatigue like crazy because now it's operating the way that it's supposed to. When I do chamber sequences with people, this is essentially why people will feel immense amounts of fatigue within the body. Really what it ends up looking like when you start doing functional patterns full on and you actually get fully into it, it's not so much about the movements anymore. It's like those movements are a tool. They're a great way to introduce people into the concept, because people need to understand how to move their body in space. But really the magic in functional patterns comes down to being able to precisely fatigue muscles through an entire range of motion. Like oftentimes what you'll see out of most practices is they'll put you into a position similar to what they do in yoga, right? They'll say, okay, look, I'm going to split your legs up like this, and now I'm going to try and tell you to squeeze the glutes so you get a stretch. Well, oftentimes we'll strengthen a muscle is they'll also take you into that deep range of motion and then have you do like little motions like this to fatigue out the hip flexors on the front side. What I've managed to do is find a way that says, okay, I'm going to drive this leg all the way from the back of hyperextension and take it all the way through flexion and create a massive amount of tension through the entire range of motion. Like most of the time when somebody goes into hip flexion from here to here, there's going to come a point where somewhere along the lines, their body disintegrates. It stops making a connection. There should never really be a time. Like I use these things called EMGs, electromyography units. We would put them as sensors on the muscles. We tampered around with them for about 2 months. And we had people run on treadmills. We found that the people who ran the fastest, people who were the most athletic, typically never had a muscle ever misfire. The muscles would always stay in a contractile state. It was people who were more dysfunctional that would end up having, at some point during the hip flexor, a muscle switch off completely. And then at some point it would switch on. Then it would switch off. Then it would switch on. And you would see like the muscles switch on and off based upon how they were moving forward in space. What chamber sequences teach the body to do, the more precise you are, is they teach you to actually never allow the muscle to switch off through the entire range of motion. So in essence, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'm in hip flexion. Now I'm in hip flexion. Now, how do I position the body to go? Let's say I'm going to take this motion. Now you're going to see the figure doesn't move. Now I'm going to use that mechanical lever and then adjust my body in a certain way to ensure that the glutes never lose fatigue through that range of motion. That's essentially what I'm at. That's the stuff that I do behind closed. It's the stuff that goes on behind the theater, right? Never. So
don't give more. Don't give more to people. They need to pay that.
Pretty much, that's kind of how it works, bro. Because at the end of the day, man, it's like I would like to run open source and actually make this stuff more available for people, but unfortunately, it's not. I don't get a lot. People aren't as apt to want to give me the credit that I deserve for what I do, and it is what it is. And so I have to play as a business person. I have to play the business game just like everybody else, man, unfortunately. And this kind of goes into one of my problems that I have with capitalism. And this is like one of the issues with capitalism is that people think that capitalism drives innovation. And what I've found is that it doesn't really drive innovation. It takes innovators like myself, and it forces me to have to keep the information that I know a secret in order for me to maintain my position on the market. And I'm saying it directly to everybody right now. I'm like, hey, look, I'm not hiding it. I hide this information intentionally because if I begin to reveal all this information, I lose my position on the market. I create more competitors, people who aren't necessarily going to be better than me anyway. I dilute the brand. I dilute the message. People forget who the originator of this concept was. And the next thing you know, the lessons are lost because, and what I've learned out of all this, Tristan, is that the lessons matter more than anything in life. And I guess so this is where I'll close it out because I got to get going. But what matters to me more than anything,
don't worry.
are the lessons. What are the lessons that we learn in life? Like I always think about that if something goes wrong, I ask myself, why did that go wrong? What were the factors that led for me going wrong? When I did that technique, if I had Kyle Dake wrestle in a match and there was a time when he lost the match and I was like, geez, there was a time he lost to this guy. It was over it was in Russia. It was at the Urigan. And I was like, fuck, he lost. I'm like, and he was under my tutelage at that time. Like he was working with my guy, Pablo. Mm-hmm. 1 second. Can you see me? Okay, cool. Yeah. He was working with my guy, Pablo. And I'm like, damn, he lost. And it was not necessarily a super convincing loss, but it was fairly convincing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what didn't I account for? What lessons am I not learning here? What is it that I need to figure out to ensure that this problem doesn't end up happening again? And so I obsessed over it. I'm a really insecure person. And so I said, I can't have this happen again. I need to make sure that we overcome this because I feel that Kyle is the best wrestler on the planet already. How do I ensure that this doesn't happen again? So I got to thinking and I had to start thinking about, okay, well, when the leg kicks back, is the abdominal wall supposed to retract? Is it supposed to protract? Is it supposed to elevate? Is it supposed to depress? What are the factors that need to come in? What's the mechanism? What's the framework that I have that's wrong that led to him losing? That year, I've made some amazing discoveries. I make amazing discoveries all the time. Anyway, later on, we go to the World Championships. He wrestles the same guy in the semifinals, and he tech falls him. He completely destroys him in the second period by tech fall, which is kind of like almost like a knockout in wrestling. Like he completely punked the guy. So really, within 6 months, we completely turned around the result because I always thought about understanding, learning the lesson. What's the lesson? How did I come to that? I asked myself that if the spine can bend forward and straightforward and back to straightforward to back, then that means that I can also bend side to side. So ultimately, then that means that maybe there's dysfunctions that run front to back and side to side, and maybe they're the same dysfunction. And my perception of it is what's screwed up. And if I can find the commonality between the forward and back and side to side, then ultimately I can codify what more problems are in the body by looking for the more simple aspect of mechanics altogether. And I believe that that's what people are missing when they don't decide to cite me as a source, is they lose the lessons. It's the lesson. For me, everything comes back down to learning the lesson, to understanding, why did I fail? What did I do to get it wrong? Why did my fighter get knocked out? What did I do wrong? I need to learn the lesson. What's the framework? What about my thinking is preventing me from being able to overcome this barrier? And then from beyond that, how do I identify what the barrier is? Because so many times people don't think about, what's the barrier? What, like,
Yep.
I could say maybe it was, my cat was sick that day and that's why I couldn't perform. I drank this juice and then the juice threw me off. And or you know what? I didn't pray to God this day or whatever. And because I didn't pray, maybe that's what happened. Those are improbable things. Those are improbable circumstances that lead to people to failing. What I always think about is, I'm like, am I being real enough within myself to say, did I fail because I didn't account for the things that I need to account for to solve that problem? That's what matters more than me than anything, is trying to find out what's truly my shortcoming. Before, you didn't draw the correlation that back squats were hurting your back, right?
Yep.
Let me put it this way. I was with one of my Kathy's clients. We were hanging out, and I had mentioned, like, about this happened to be about like 14, 15 years ago. I went to Hong Kong, and I remembered at that time that there were people wearing masks. And I was like, oh, people wearing masks. What do you think went through my mind at that time, Tristan, when I saw people wearing masks in China? What do you think went through my mind? How do you think I thought about that? What would you guess? I wouldn't imagine that you would guess the way that I would think about it. If you do, that's awesome. But I mentioned it to her, and she was like, wow, I would have never thought about it like that. What do you think went through my mind when I saw that person with that mask?
Well, 14 years ago, it can be like, wow, this is going to be the end of the world with this pollution, like no more air.
No, I thought it was the pollution, but I also knew that they were afraid of illness. So the question that I was asking for myself is, I'm like, when is that going to come to the West? When is that going to come to mainland America? Here we are about 14, 15 years later, and we're dealing with the circumstance. That's how I think. I'm like, what's the prevention for that problem? I'm thinking about impending problems as they're moving along, because I'm always thinking, what's the next variable? What's the next technical detail that I need to look at to account for? What's the next mechanical variable that I need to account for? So that's what I was thinking about. I was thinking, when's that going to come to us? If it's here, if they share the same planet with us, and we are just a short flight away from China to the United States, when is that shit going to come to us? And here we are today with coronavirus and all these other problems. And so for me, what I try and do is get people to understand the lessons. What are the lessons? If you don't understand the lesson and you don't think about, well, how does that drinking of alcohol affect me? How does eating those grains affect me? How does, people are like, I love this. I love that. I believe in freedom, freedom. I'm a capitalist. I'm a communist. They believe in all these things, but they never think about, okay, why do I believe in these things? And are these things actually helping me? What are they really doing for me? These are the questions that I ask myself every single day. And what I try and do is get people to understand the lessons in life, to understand this is what's actually helping me and this is what's hurting me. And I believe that that's what my prerogative is in the world. And if people give me the chance to explain where I'm going with things, I firmly believe that the methodology that I employ through functional patterns will be able to help people understand why their life is so crappy sometimes and how they can actually make it better for themselves, even with very little resources and whatnot. So that's kind of it, man. I hope that you got some information from this.
Oh man, I think we can spend here hours and hours and hours, but 3 points, very important. And you mentioned, one, I'm glad you have that vision to prevent your information get out, because that's why the reason the fitness industry is wrong, is on unbalance. Because it's too easy to get information, let's say, talking about yoga or other fitness things. Let's let the yoga away. So that can be too sad now. But the lack of protection of what you learn as a professional is what, like, everybody has access to information without the consultation or the person, the guidance.
Hey, babe, can you give me some water? Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
And that's why the people start to do wrong. If you start to share that information, as you said, I like to keep it here until the person come and learn from me. So because you are very dedicated and you have the information, you are going to teach the people to do right the thing, the move you need to do. I believe you put functional patterns like, okay, you can Google exercises. At the end of the day, it's like the el teléfono descompuesto, no? The broken telephone. The people that start to do that movement incorrectly to other person, that person is going to teach the person incorrect, and at the end of the day, it's going to be wrong. And I think you said the right thing. People in the fitness industry, if you are doing something, yeah.
I want to touch on one more thing because I was watching this thing with Joe Rogan. Because he was talking, I believe, to some guy, and they brought up another fitness personality. It's a guy that's at the top. I don't want to mention names. I'm not trying to create drama, but he's like, you know what I really like about this guy is that he gives out his stuff for free, and you know I think it's a great thing. And I'm like asking myself, do you give out your comedy for free? Like, no, you get paid for your stand-up, and when you put up a special, you get paid by Netflix to get paid for what you do. But what's amazing is that in our industry, it's so common practice to be like, hey, you know what? Just give out this potentially life-changing information for nothing. I remember, I don't know if you know who Carlos Mencia is or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
People went hoopla. They went nuts because he supposedly stole some jokes. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. I don't know how many jokes he stole. I don't know the insides and outs of what happened to the guy. What I do know is this, is that jokes don't really matter. They're inconsequential to our society. But when it comes to actually techniques, when it comes to things that actually enhance people's health, I just find it really amazing that people are like, you know what? I want my fitness, I want my health to be cheap, right? Or I want it to be free. And I think that we've conditioned the industry to think, we've conditioned people to think that when you come to the fitness industry, be ready for a handout. And I partook in this. I did this for the longest time. And you know what it did? It just inhibited the growth of my company because everybody started doing it. They started doing it wrong. And then they're just like, hey, look, I already understand what functional patterns is. Ultimately,
and that's the reason why NAUDI Aguilar and functional pattern is known in all these congress or fitness events international, because of course it does know who you are. That's know what your knowledge go to participate. Yeah, because it's when everything can start broken and the wrong way. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you believe it's a good yoga trainer?
No, it's impossible. Let me. And this is. I'm
no. We don't offend anybody, but
yeah, of course, it's impossible. If you're within a box, Tristan, you can't get out of it because the tool. Let me put it this way: can you build a spaceship with a hammer?
No.
That's just, the tools will only take you so far within the confines of yoga. And the thing is, unless they use new tools, unless they use new technologies, it's never going to change. And never mind that yoga is a system that has existed for thousands of years. And it's not until recent times that it's actually been evolved and changed as a practice. I don't believe that there's such a good, I've never seen, let me put it this way. When I see a yogi that moves like Barry Sanders, like Juan Manuel Marquez or Julio Cesar Chavez or Floyd Mayweather, or I see them run like Usain Bolt, when they're getting people moving like that, then at that point I'll say, and here's another thing, because this is another really interesting one. People will say, well, you know what, Naudi, not everybody wants to move like a Usain Bolt or a Barry Sanders. And I'm like, well, how many people even think that they have the option to do that in their life to begin with? How many people think that they can even do that in the first place? Most of them don't. Most of them don't even realize that it's an option that you can move that much better. Like if I asked you right now, Tristan, if I said, hey, what would you prefer to be, Tristan? Would you like to, you know who Usain Bolt is, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Would you like to have the speed of Usain Bolt, the power and agility of a Barry Sanders, the boxing abilities of a Floyd Mayweather mixed with the Julio Cesar Chavez? Or would you rather be a mentally enlightened person inside of a wheelchair who can't move at all, that's paralyzed from the neck down? Which one would you prefer?
Of course, to move.
Yeah, I think anybody in the right mind would say that. I don't think any person would say, you know what, I'd rather be paralyzed instead of being able to move like a lion or a tiger or a cheetah. I think everybody would say, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to move amazing. The thing is, there's a whole slew of excuses that people make when it comes to saying, hey, this is why we should keep doing yoga. And sometimes they'll say, you haven't found the right instructor. Unless a person is actually getting people on a regular basis to overcome their dysfunctions, then I have to assume that when people are talking about yoga, they're operating from a box and they've never gotten out of that box. Bro, I've been in boxes this big, and then I break through it. I get into a box that big. Then the box gets bigger and I break bigger and bigger and bigger, because I don't attach myself to my techniques. I don't attach myself to my practice. I don't attach myself to anything. If I end up for all I know, I could end up becoming some spiritual guru going, om, om. I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think the physics of, I think it's been tested, and there's a reason that people who do yoga generally still tend to stay degenerated. But I'm open to the possibility that I need to go down that route. None of the data that I'm researching, none of the information that I look at is telling me that I'm going to need to go down that path. But I don't attach myself to any of the techniques that I discover. The second I invent something, what do you think I'm thinking about, Tristan? The second I create something new, what do you think I'm doing? I am criticizing that invention. I think about what is wrong with this technique. The second I come up with it, I say, there's something wrong with this technique. It's only going to go so far. And now what I want to do is find out what's wrong with it and fix it. So then I can get to that next level to then find out what's wrong with that. And then I'm going to find out what's wrong with that. And then I'm going to find out what's wrong with that. And this cycle just keeps doing this until eventually your growth just goes, it's like this. And then it's like, and that's what I feel like I'm at right now. Getting a
I can connect you to you with, I know you need to go, but I want to say that. So I can connect to you with what you said, your words, because for example, one of my favorite fighters lately, an MMA, was George St. Pierre. And he mentioned many times, I want to repeat, and this is the word, the same move more than 100 times to find how I do it correctly. And that's the words, move. He needs to repeat the same move more than 100 times to find how doing correctly. When I hear that word, I start talking about move, because he needs to find how he was rotating the hips, how he's moving his body. And the guy is an amazing athlete.
Well, I'll tell you this much. What sucks about it is that he doesn't think about that anywhere outside of martial arts. When it comes to his strength training, you see how he runs, you see how he jumps, how he moves in general. And then you're like, what you're doing in MMA isn't actually being translated with the type of training. So the way he looks at it from a martial arts perspective, fantastic. The way he sees it everywhere outside of that, he still did Olympic lifting and things like that. I don't know if you knew that about him or not. It's crazy though.
Anymore.
Huh?
He's trying to do less, but he do good.
Yes, but let me put it this way. Imagine if he didn't do that and he actually started if he applied that same mindset to the actual field of training when it comes to actually training the mechanics before you get into the martial arts, I can only imagine what that guy would have been able to do with his career. That's why I still feel like in many regards, he's still stuck in his body. There were still things, there was dimensional aspects to his technique that could have gotten substantially better. And I feel that what he did outside of the field of MMA is actually what wound up hindering his success. But with that said, the way that he viewed MMA itself, specifically, brilliant. He's as a completely brilliant man. He's a genius in what he does. But I think it's still interesting that I find it interesting that he couldn't draw that correlation with, well, if this exists in martial arts, when I do this guard pass, or if I throw this spinning, turning side kick to the body, then what does that mean for my strength training? And that's what I believe I kind of like discovered a very long time ago. Is I'm like, well, how do I take the black and the white, and how do I approach that gray area in the middle and try and make this actually work? Like, how do I blend it all together so it all looks like the same thing? And unfortunately, in our industry, and that's the whole thing. I don't really work with fighters very often. Right now, I'm working with the guy Johnny Eblin, because this guy really puts in the work. But in general, man, athletes just don't think about it that way. Yeah. Maybe this interview might help them think that way, but they never think about that. The field of training is that the field of strength training should prepare you for what you're doing in the martial arts and whatever sport that you're doing. If at any point it's not preparing you specifically in an even more precise fashion than the field of play, then there's something wrong with that training and something needs to be improved. That intent needs to be there. But George St. Pierre, he's one of my favorite fighters that I've ever watched. I always ask the question. I'm like, how much further? You say that with any athlete.
Oh yeah.
How much further could they have? How much further could Usain Bolt have gone had he corrected his scoliosis? You get some coaches. I've had coaches that said, "Well, NAUDI, Usain Bolt had scoliosis, and he was the fastest man in the world." And I'm like, so you're saying that the scoliosis is the reason that he wound up being the fastest runner on the planet? So ultimately, what we have to do is just tell sprinters to run with scoliosis, then, right? If you're going to draw that conclusion, and they're never like, no. So what I'm saying is, imagine if Usain Bolt could actually create the kind of shearing force that he does, the torsional force, the bending force on both sides of his body, how much faster he would have ran. Imagine. Yeah. That's what I ask with a lot of these athletes. These days, I don't really care, bro, because my biggest concern is trying to work with general populations and helping them address their problems. Because for me, the people that I value more than anything are the ones that actually keep this thing together, man. The people that build houses, the people that do that work on electrical components, the people that build cars, the engineers. Those are the people that I'm most concerned with serving in this society. The people that really keep this shit together. So yeah, exactly. So for me, really what matters more than anything is trying to service the glue that holds this shit together. So that way we can keep it together. So it's interesting to think about when it comes to athletes, but I'm kind of retired from working with most athletes at this point. And I feel like I've gotten a great learning experience from it, but yeah. Anyway, man.
And just one more thing. Just one more thing. And that this is, I know you need to go, but so, and for all our audience, please, I see many good comments, guys. Thank you so much for what you are saying. So people saying this is a bomb and it's good to hear you. This was great conversation. Thank you. No, you're welcome, guys. It's great to have here now the Aguilar founder and owner of.
Thank you, Kristen.
I hear great insight, etc. We have good comments, but I want to touch something. What happened with Instagram? Why they start to, and this is not the first time happened, because you are not using bad words. You are not using something rant like
hate speech.
You know, is you. The thing is this, and really makes me concerned in what kind of society we are living when suppose we are in this country to is the free speech, and you the only thing you are saying is sharing your information, giving your feedback, your point of view about something to maybe can help. And it's the most easy thing is, if you don't like to hear NAUDI Aguilar, just change the channel and go ahead. So keep moving.
Look, this is the challenge though, bro, is like, look, it's like, who are we going to blame? Like, I don't blame people for being skeptical. It just comes down to I don't blame people for being skeptical, and I don't blame people for being biased. For one, they're going to be skeptical because they feel that they can't trust me immediately. And two, they're going to be biased because they have to make money. And then three, you can't blame Instagram for instituting those blocks because, bro, they don't make enough money to be able to like pay enough people to keep an eye on what's going on. So really, it's nobody's fault, man. My perspective is I don't get mad at anybody because at the end of the day, it's like nobody's at fault here. We're all doing the best that we can with what we got at the end of the day, bro. And at the end of the day, also, we have to realize that there's a time for peace, but then there's also a time for war. And on my end, I realize that I'm not going to simply be able to come in here with the yoga community and be like, hey, let's be buddy and let's try and make yoga work, because you can't make a system like that work. And so sometimes when there's war, there's going to be the foul play that comes along with it, bro. It just is the way that it is. If I end up getting banned and I get my social media outlets taken off of the website, I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared to say, you know what, I'm going to live like a minimalist and do what, and if I got to get a regular job and go build houses for a living, then I'll build houses for a living. Fortunately, I've developed a body of knowledge to be able to maintain my body to go build houses or go be an electrician. And I have no ego when it comes to going to be a plumber and cleaning up a bunch of shit from a toilet. I don't mind if that's what I got to do to make a living, bro. I don't attach myself to the outcomes like most people. And fortunately, it allows me to maintain a certain level of sanity with the way that I operate in this existence, man. So it's unfortunate. I wish it wasn't dirty and that people didn't do dirty shit in this industry, bro. But it's always been like that. And like you said, I wasn't swearing. I only used completely respectful dialogue with people with practice. I even gave yoga some credit for saying, hey, it did the breath work components of it and the meditative work, that those aspects of it were beneficial. But even nonetheless, man, you have to realize that even if I take it the wrong way, I'm taking away the position of advantage of an entire multi-billion-dollar industry. If people listen to me today, then that would erase an entire industry. There would be no more yoga industry if people listen to me. And then you also have to think about how many other industries are reliant upon that frame of thinking. And if you think about it from that standpoint, then it becomes much more obvious why I don't necessarily make the most amount of friends in this industry. That's why you don't see me on like podcasts everywhere most of the time, bro, because most of the time they don't want to bring me on because they're thinking, well, what is this going to mean for my audience? It's like, if this guy says, hey, look, there's no reason to talk about the things that we talk about most of the time, and we need to actually get to work, then what does that mean for them? It doesn't spell good things for many people economically if functional patterns thrives. It's not like, hey, look, what functional patterns promotes is a certain type of science that then says, hey, look, now you got to buy these supplements, or now you got to buy this medicine. It's like it doesn't promote those types of things. It doesn't like if functional patterns rewarded dysfunctional behavior, you would find people everywhere wanting to participate in it. If it rewarded alcoholism, if the overall ethos of the company rewarded alcoholism or drug abuse, then people would be completely fine with it. If it rewarded religiosity, spirituality, but the problem is that it collides with everything. Unfortunately, it collides because functionality is not in our societal blueprint. It's not really like a guiding light to our society. It's kind of like an afterthought for most people. So when you're saying, hey, how do we find functionality? How do we find efficiency in everything that we do? It's, your life, it's a war. That's really what it is. It's a battle.
Exactly. And it's one thing you mentioned, yeah, like at your experience traveling 14 years ago to China and seeing that. And we know perfect how works. I hope don't be banished here now on this video what I want to say, but we know perfect the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, they don't want to see the people healthy. That's why the cost is elevated to fix, to try to heal people from cancer, all these things, because it's the system, yeah? It's the system.
I'm going to be a bit of a contrarian when it comes to that, bro. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't believe that big pharma thinks that way, bro. Let me put it this way. If I had $5 billion in my bank account or $10 billion in my bank account, and then it's kind of a relief if somebody puts me into bankruptcy, because then I don't have to work anymore. It's like when you have a company, like for me, you know what keeps me running Functional Patterns is that I have people working like to help me run this company that I pay. And when I think about running this company, it's not about, at some point it becomes less about you and it becomes more about making sure that the people that are around you, that you're taking care of them because they're taking care of you. If somebody can take away that pressure from me, if I could make enough, even beyond that, the way I see it is that if I find somebody who's better than me in my field and they can essentially solve problems in a much faster way than I can, I'll be like, yeah, I'll shut down Functional Patterns tomorrow and I'll join your team. I don't mind. I don't think that people in our industry, I don't think that big pharma to any degree is trying to halt the growth of any industry. It just comes down to this. You have big pharma on one side, and then on the opposite side of that, you have the essential oils, the alternative medicine, the shit that also doesn't work. If you look at people who do yoga, who are on the alternative medicine side, how do they look, Tristan? Do they look really healthy? Do they look very strong or not?
No.
And if you look at people on the other side who are doped up on drugs, on legal narcotics, do they look good? No, they look like they look like shit. They both look like shit. So ultimately what it comes down to is if you're going to replace the old, you need to actually have something that's going to replace it. And that's the problem. It's not that big pharma is trying to hold anything back. It's just that what people do on the other side also sucks. And it's probably, one second.
Yep, you're fine.
Yep. The stuff that's on the other side also sucks, but it sucks even more than big pharma. Like big pharma is more consistent in terms of what it does than when you look at alternative medicine. And it's not to say that all alternative medicine is the same in its efficiency. It doesn't all operate at the same level. But I will say this: it's way more inconsistent than traditional medicine. It's not as consistent. So my perspective is, I don't carry that mentality that big pharma wants people to stay sick. I think at some level there's a pressure for doctors to say, hey, let me keep people on medicine or whatever it may be. But I don't think that anybody's consciously doing that. For me personally, I think that essentially that if the establishment is going to listen, they're going to listen when somebody gets good enough results to be listened to. And until that happens, they're not going to take a bow. That's how it is. I don't believe that they assassinate people. I don't believe that they kill people when they have cures for cancer, because ultimately, bro, the cure for cancer means that you need to have a strong redox potential, that the life force energy that's inside of you, whatever drives the electricity in your body, if it's strong, you're probably not going to get ill. If it's weak, you're closer to dying. It's as simple as that. And there's no medicine, there's no external exogenous medicine that you can use to tell a person who's mostly dying to undie. If you're on the brink of dying, no medicine is going to heal you. So let me put it this way: if your battery is at 95% charge, then you probably aren't going to need medicine. But if your battery's at 5% charge, there's no medicine that's just going to recharge your batteries. No medicine is going to exist to do that. You have to find out internally what you have to do to get that charge up. I believe that what Functional Pattern is doing, what it's uncovering, is how you get that spark, how you get how you get more cells to wake up and be like, How do you add more battery cells inside of your body so that way you can actually charge yourself properly? So the whole thing is, man, when you look at the pharmaceutical industry, I don't think that it's evil. I don't think that they're doing anything wrong. I just think that they're extremely skeptical based upon all the bullshit that people try doing, all the short-sighted thinking, all the yogic nonsense. They all see the same shit too, man. And I don't fault them for having the same skepticism that I do. I've seen this on both sides, and I ascribe to neither of them. In fact, I believe that the pharma side makes more sense than the alternative medicine side does in many circumstances. Both of them have their relevance, but you can extract from both of them because both of them respect science to some degree. So that's why I don't pigeonhole either of them. I realize that they both have their contextual use, man. They're both good. I'm an imperialist, man. I believe that Western society is the best society and that we need to adopt the values that are within it, man. So I don't mean to be like contrarian to you or whatever, but that's more my mindset.
No. I really, that's why I invited you, and that's why I like to hear you, because I like to listen. It's no, always I learn something. Yeah, listen.
Yes.
I think that's it. As I said, society need to listen, because I can say something to maybe I'm wrong, no, and I can listen facts and put me and say, okay, make me think.
And I'm not saying I'm right.
Nope.
I'm not saying I'm right
but
by
it's good to
anything that
listen.
I say, bro. For all I know, big pharma, there could be a big conspiracy, and they're saying, hey man, we need to keep people sick. For all I know, I don't think it is. My personal feelings is that the probabilities. I operate on a realm of probabilities, on a balance of probabilities, and so for me, I just think that it's not as probable that that's going to be the case. I just feel that there hasn't been an alternative put forth yet to replace the systems of old. And until that alternative is put forth and it's actually getting demonstrable results on a regular basis, that you won't see people begin to diverge away from those specific places. So I just think my objective is, man, with functional patterns is I'm trying to get the best results possible to sweeten up the pot for people to say, because most of the time people think, hey, if I'm going to train, I'm doing it to look sexy. On mine, I feel like I'm looking a lot better. I'm as close to a six-pack.
I saw your pictures. I see your transformation.
Yes, and I feel like I'm getting a lot better, and I'm able to retain it as I get older, even as I take on more stressors in my life and not less stressors. So the whole thing is, my objective is to try and ensure to do whatever I can to get people the right kinds of stimuli to help them overcome, so they look better, they feel better, and just in general, they have a better life. And I feel if I can do that, then ultimately they may not need that big pharma does need to be there to some extent. It serves a function, and so does alternative medicine. But somewhere in between, there needs to be a buffer in between those two places to kind of bring it all together and make it work. Because I believe we still need to have all the medicines that are there. We need to like also add other things in there to fill in the gaps. And I feel that FP is really as a system that's there. I believe it fills in the most gaps of any other system that relates to training the body, as it relates to enhancing physiology, and as it relates to regeneration on a general scale.
Right. Well, Naudi, I really appreciate it. I know you told me you want to go to bed early without tomorrow.
But it's still good. Time is still good.
I know, here too. But first of all, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for be open and be very so genuine and talk and give us some information and touch those topics to people was guessing maybe or want to know what happened. Yeah, like about what's functional patterns, what was the situation with social media and Instagram, about the yoga conversation. But also thank you for always try to contribute to the society and the human functionality get better. Thank you for being worried about that, because not always we want to find somebody to really can dedicate the life to pursue it, to make people understand how we need to continue to be living in this planet. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you had me on, bro, and just in general, I could see that you're looking at the right things, man. So keep it up. It was a pleasure being on with you, man, and I had a great time talking to you, Tristan.
No, te agradezco muchísimo.
Igualmente, carnal.
También
Igualmente.
habla español. Ladies and gentlemen, founder and CEO from Functional Patterns. So please go and check the website, functionalpatterns.com, if you want to learn. And also you, my friends in yoga, if you think, I ask you before to say something, go to the website, check what he's doing, and let's do it. Let's practice. I think it's good to be open minds, go and practice. If you don't like it, it's like a taste of cake. If you don't like the cake, don't eat it. But I believe you got to love this cake. Believe me, I taste that cake. So go functionalpartners.com. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Naudi Aguilar. Naudi, thank you so much. Have a great night. Enjoy it, and hope see you around Seattle one time. And I promise keep following you. And people from Instagram and social media, please let him speak and show what he knows, because he don't knows better than him about functional mechanics. Naudi Aguilar, Functional Partners, thank you so much for being here with us, Naudi. I appreciate it.
Gracias. Hasta luego, carnal.
Hasta luego, carnal.